At a Thanksgiving dinner meant to celebrate family, a woman quietly signs her divorce papers, unaware to them all, the next hour will destroy everything they thought they controlled.
The house looked perfect from the outside. Warm yellow lights glowed through tall windows, and the smell of roasted turkey drifted into the cold evening air. Anyone passing by would think this was a picture of happiness. A family gathered in gratitude, laughter waiting just beyond the door. Inside, the dining table stretched long and heavy with food. Crystal glasses, polished cutlery, carefully folded napkins. Everything was elegant. Everything was planned. Everything except peace. She sat at the far end of the table. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, her back straight, her face soft and composed. If someone didn't know her, they might think she was shy, or quiet by nature, or simply overwhelmed by the grandness of the evening. But she wasn't overwhelmed. She was waiting. Around her, the husband's family filled the room with loud voices and confident laughter. His mother spoke the most, directing servants, correcting small details, reminding everyone how important this dinner was. His father sat proudly at the head of the table, carving the turkey as if he owned not just the house, but everyone in it. Her husband barely looked at her. When he did, it was quick, careful, like someone checking the time before an appointment they didn't want to attend. She noticed everything. The way conversations stopped when she spoke. The way plates were passed over her before reaching others. The way smiles never fully reached their eyes when they looked at her. She smiled anyway. She always did. No one asked if she was comfortable. No one asked how her day had been. To them, she wasn't the center of the evening. She was an extra chair. Presence tolerated, not celebrated. And yet, she knew something they didn't. She knew this dinner was not about gratitude. It was about control. The clinking of glasses echoed like a gavel striking wood. Each sound felt final. Each laugh felt rehearsed. The room felt less like a home, and more like a courtroom. Who was on trial? She glanced at her husband again. His jaw was tight, his shoulders tense. The decision had already been made, just not spoken yet. So this is how it begins, she thought. She looked down at the table, at the carefully arranged plates, at the food she barely touched. Her appetite had left days ago, replaced by a quiet certainty. There would be no argument tonight, no scene, no raised voice. They expected tears. They expected pleading. They expected weakness. What they didn't expect was her calm. A question hovered unspoken in the room, heavy and unavoidable. How do you end a marriage without ever raising your voice? She lifted her gaze slowly, meeting the eyes across the table. Faces full of judgment, pride, and assumptions. None of them saw fear in her. None of them saw anger. Only patience. Because some endings don't begin with shouting. They begin with silence. And sometimes the quietest person at the table is the one holding the most power.
The sound that changed everything wasn't loud. It was the soft scrape of a chair against the floor. Her husband stood up slowly, adjusting his jacket as if he were about to give a toast. Conversations faded. Forks paused mid-air. Even the laughter seemed to hold its breath. He cleared his throat. "There's something we need to take care of," he said, his voice calm, measured, too calm for a family dinner. From a slim leather folder in his hand, he pulled out a stack of papers and placed them gently on the table, right in front of her plate. Not slammed, not thrown, just placed. Neat, controlled. Divorce papers. For a moment, time stopped. The ticking clock on the wall suddenly sounded too loud. The candles flickered as if they, too, were unsure what would happen next. She stared at the papers, the black letters swimming slightly, as though they didn't belong to her life at all. Around the table, reactions bloomed like quiet poison. His mother leaned back, lips tightening into a satisfied smile she didn't bother to hide. An aunt raised her eyebrows, clearly entertained, as if this were a dramatic scene in a show she had waited for. Someone whispered something, followed by a suppressed laugh. No one looked surprised, except her. She slowly lifted her eyes to her husband. He didn't meet her gaze. Instead, he spoke again, formal, distant, rehearsed. "This is for the best," he said. "We'll keep things civil." Civil. As if this were a contract ending, not a marriage. As if love could be folded into legal pages and passed across a table between gravy and mashed potatoes. Her hands trembled slightly, but she placed them flat on the table, steadying herself. Her chest felt tight, as if the air had been quietly removed from the room. Was this really happening? She could feel every eye on her now, waiting, measuring, enjoying the moment more than they should have. They expected tears. They expected her voice to crack. They expected her to beg, or break, or explode. But she didn't. So this is how you chose to end us, she thought. She picked up the papers slowly. The sound of them moving was sharp in the silence. Page after page. Cold language. Clean sentences. Her name written, where love once lived. The room felt heavier with each second she remained quiet. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else shifted impatiently. Her husband finally looked at her. You can take your time, he said, though his tone suggested he'd already decided how this would go. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. What none of them realized was that her world hadn't paused. It had narrowed, focused. Because sometimes, humiliation isn't loud. Sometimes, it's served neatly, right at the dinner table. The room stayed silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, watching, judgmental. She held the papers with both hands and began to read, slowly, carefully, as if each word deserved her full attention. The sound of the pages turning felt louder than any voice in the room. Around her, whispers moved like shadows, sliding from one end of the table to the other. Finally, it was bound to happen. She never really fit in anyway. They didn't try to hide it. Every sentence on the paper carried weight. Division of assets, signatures, dates, clean, emotionless language that erased years of shared mornings and quiet promises. Her eyes moved steadily across the lines, but her face remained calm, too calm for their comfort. They watched her closely, waiting for the moment she would crack. Her husband leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying her like a problem he had already solved. His mother whispered something to the woman beside her and smiled, as if this silence proved exactly what she had always believed. Weak. That's what they saw. A woman too stunned to speak, too small to fight back, too broken to protest. They were wrong. Inside her, memories rose, not in chaos, but in order. The first time she felt unwelcome. The dinners where her voice was ignored. The jokes that cut just deep enough to hurt, never deep enough to be called cruel. She had learned long ago how to sit still in discomfort. She reached the final page and paused. The room leaned in. Did they think she didn't notice the way they looked at her now? Like a problem finally being removed. Like a burden lifted from the family name. She took a slow breath. If silence makes them feel powerful, let them have it, for now, she thought. Her fingers didn't shake. Her posture didn't collapse. Her voice didn't rise to defend herself, because she wasn't here to defend anything anymore. A single tear threatened to form, but she blinked it away, not out of pride, but clarity. Tears were what they wanted. Tears would confirm the story they had already written about her. Instead, she gave them nothing, and that made them uncomfortable. Someone coughed. A chair scraped. The clock kept ticking. Why was she taking so long? Because silence can be a language. And right now, it was saying more than words ever could. They mistook her quiet for defeat. They mistook her stillness for fear. What they didn't see was control, gathered, centered, and waiting. She lowered the papers onto the table gently, as if placing something precious down. Her eyes lifted, meeting the room one last time, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with resolve. She didn't reach for the pen right away. Instead, her mind drifted, quietly, gently, back through the years that led her to this moment. She remembered the early days, when love felt simple, when she believed patience could fix anything. She had adjusted her dreams to fit into his life, softened her voice to keep the peace, and learned to smile even when her feelings were dismissed. Each sacrifice felt small at the time. Together, they became a pattern, a life. There were dinners where she cooked alone while he arrived late, phone still glowing in his hand. Holidays where she defended him to her own family, even when he never defended her to his. Moments when his relatives spoke over her, corrected her, laughed at her ideas, and he stayed silent. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself love required endurance, but endurance slowly turned into erasure. In one memory, she stood in the kitchen after a family gathering, washing dishes while laughter echoed from the living room. No one asked her to join. No one noticed she was missing. She dried her hands on a towel, and stared at her reflection in the dark window, barely recognizing the woman looking back. Was this what love was supposed to feel like? Another memory surfaced, his mother's sharp tone, wrapped in politeness. You're very lucky, she had said once. Lucky to belong. Lucky to be chosen. Lucky to stay quiet. She stayed quiet. She stayed loyal. She stayed. Until one day, she realized she was the only one fighting to keep something alive. Back at the table, the pen lay beside the papers, waiting. The room expected drama, resistance, words. They didn't know she had already argued, internally, years ago, in every sleepless night, in every swallowed response, in every apology she made for things that were never her fault. This isn't the end of me, she thought. It's the end of pretending. Her hand closed around the pen, not in anger, not in fear, in certainty. She signed her name carefully, each letter steady, each stroke deliberate. The act wasn't rushed. It wasn't emotional. It was final. This was not surrender. It was choice. She wasn't giving up a marriage that honored her. She was releasing herself from a story where she was expected to disappear quietly. Signing the papers meant she no longer had to explain her worth or prove her patience. The room misunderstood her calm. They always had. What they saw as weakness was actually clarity. What they saw as loss was freedom taking shape on paper. She placed the pen down and folded her hands, as if she had just completed a long overdue task. Some endings don't need arguments. Some truths don't need defending. The moment the pen left the paper, the room exhaled. It was subtle at first, a shift in posture, a loosening of shoulders. But then it grew louder. Conversations restarted. Glasses clinked. Laughter returned as if nothing sacred had just ended. His mother was the first to smile openly. "Well," she said, lifting her glass slightly, "that's settled." A few people chuckled. Someone made a light comment about fresh starts. Another congratulated her husband with a firm handshake, as if he had just closed a successful deal instead of ending a marriage. "Better this way," an uncle said. Clean, simple, clean, simple." She sat quietly as the room filled with relief, not hers, but theirs. The tension they had created was gone now, replaced by comfort and confidence. Plates were passed again. Turkey was carved. Dessert was discussed. She had become invisible. Her husband leaned back, smiling for the first time that evening. The worry on his face dissolved, replaced by something close to pride. "It's for the best," he said to the table, not to her. "We all knew it." They nodded in agreement, as if they had all been waiting for her to step aside. She watched them carefully. The raised glasses, the relaxed jokes, the easy way they erased her presence the second she complied. No one asked how she felt. No one thanked her for handling it with grace. Why would they? They believed the problem was solved. They think this is the end, she thought. They have no idea it's only the beginning. Someone turned the music back on. Soft, cheerful, a holiday song. The contrast was almost cruel. His mother leaned toward her husband and whispered something that made them both laugh. She caught her name in the sentence. It didn't sting the way it once would have. Pain requires attachment, and hers had already loosened. Round the table, confidence grew. They spoke freely now, no longer cautious. Plans were made, trips discussed, futures imagined, without her. And all the while, they failed to notice one important thing. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't broken. She was observing. The family believed they had won because they had removed her quietly. They mistook her compliance for collapse. They mistook her dignity for defeat. No one celebrates harder than people who think they're safe. She reached for her glass, not to toast, not to join, but to steady herself in the moment. Her face remained calm, almost serene. If anyone had been paying attention, they might have wondered why she looked so certain. But no one was paying attention. They were too busy, celebrating too early, because some victories are only illusions. And some consequences take a little time to arrive.
The doorbell rang just 40 minutes later. At first, no one moved.
Conversation falterde.
The laughter, the casual jokes, the clinking of glasses, all of it stopped mid-air. Heads turned toward the sound, curiosity mingling with unease. Her husband frowned. "Who could that be?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The front door opened, and in walked two strangers, neatly dressed, confident, carrying folders that looked far too official to be casual papers. Their eyes scanned the room quickly, landing briefly on her, and a faint, knowing smile touched the corner of their lips. Immediately, the energy in the room shifted. The warmth and comfort of celebration vanished, replaced by tension, confusion, and a quiet panic that began to rise like smoke from a fire no one could control. "What is this?" his mother asked, her voice tighter than usual, the earlier triumph replaced by suspicion. The visitors didn't answer at once. Instead, they began placing folders and documents on the table, carefully, deliberately. Legal papers, financial statements, letters she hadn't even known they'd kept. Names appeared, contracts, signatures. Each document seemed to whisper secrets, revealing truths that had been hidden beneath years of assumptions and arrogance. The husband's face went pale as he picked up one of the folders. His hands shook slightly, betraying a confidence he had assumed was untouchable. His mother's mouth opened, closed, and opened again. This isn't possible," she stammered. Whispers moved around the room. But they were no longer amused. They were scared. Disoriented. The balance of power had shifted in an instant. She watched quietly, as always, calm and steady. She didn't need to speak. She had already spoken with her actions, with her patience, with her silence. Now, the evidence she had quietly built over the years began to speak for her. They think they controlled everything, she thought. But control is an illusion when truth is waiting in the wings. The visitors addressed her directly, presenting the documents in a way that left no room for denial. Each page was a reminder. She had been preparing, watching, understanding, and protecting herself even when no one else had noticed. The room's earlier celebration crumbled like fragile.
Porcelain.
Eyes darted between her and the papers, between what they had assumed and what was now undeniable. Panic seeped into their movements. Plans, pride, and assumptions, the very foundations they had leaned on, began to tremble. Her husband opened his mouth, then closed it again, unsure of what to say. The mother's hands fumbled with a napkin as though holding on to something tangible could stabilize the chaos. And she sat there, serene. Not smug.
Not triomphant.
Just present. Watching the truth unfold like a quiet storm, knowing that this moment was the reckoning they had never prepared for. Why had they celebrated so soon? Why had they assumed her compliance meant weakness? The answer now stared back at them in black and white. Patience, preparation, and clarity always outweigh arrogance and haste.